Bonsoir. Désolé. My French is not very good. So I'm Tim Tawney. I am from NASA. I am based here in Paris to represent the space agency across Europe. We're based here, our office is based here in Paris in part because of the European Space Agency being headquartered here in Paris, and also because France, on a bilateral basis, is NASA's largest partner. So the combination of the two makes France a natural home, or Paris a natural home for us to have our European office. I do represent the agency across all of Europe though, so I'm in Germany, the United Kingdom, Italy quite a bit, Brussels less so, but there as well from time to time for our cooperation and our different activities. So tonight I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of what the agency's current activities are, get you excited about aeronautics and space, and then I'll talk a little bit about our presence here in Europe, and then a little bit about our data and applications aspects, since that was a key interest of everyone here as well. And then of course I'll take questions. So this is the organizational structure of NASA as it is today. However, the President's 2019, fiscal year 2019 budget is being released today. And depending on how Congress then reacts to that, this organizational chart may change a little bit. We'll have to see. Each administration gets to organize each agency within the federal government how they like, and so we'll have to wait and see. But this structure has, with modifications, been the overarching structure that we've had for now 60 years. This is NASA's 60th anniversary in 2018. And in 2019, we'll have the 50th anniversary of the first Apollo moon landing. So we've got two big anniversary years back to back that we're really excited about as an agency, and you'll be seeing a lot in the media over the next, through next July, so that's about not quite 18 months, we'll be seeing a lot of those anniversary events being celebrated by the agency. With the budget being released today, the proposal for 2019 is almost $20 billion US dollar budget for NASA, which is a really good position for the agency to be in. It helps support our exploration programs, our aeronautics programs, our science programs, and our technology programs for the benefit of everybody. And so what we'll see is an execution of that program over the next year with some modifications, and I'll mention some of those as we go through of what we've changed over the last couple years. One of the downfalls, though, right now is we don't have a permanent administrator. On this organizational chart at the top, our acting administrator is actually our associate administrator, who is the senior civil servant within the space agency, Robert Lightfoot. He has been acting since last January, so a little over a year now, as our administrator. And he's doing a great job, but there's a certain political level that you eventually need the permanent administrator. So in our case, we're waiting on the Senate to confirm that administrator. He's a congressman from Oklahoma, James Bridenstine. And when the Senate acts, then we'll hopefully have our administrator in the near future. In the meantime, Robert will continue to be the acting administrator. And within this, we have 10 field centers down on, I guess that's your bottom right of this chart. That's where we're spread across the United States. We have 4 main mission directorates, which are in the middle, which I'll come to those in a minute. And then our support organization. So I sit within the International Interagency Relations Office, which is a box on the left-hand side off of the administrator's office. We have 3 overseas positions here in Paris. We have an office in Moscow, and we have an office in Tokyo that covers Asia. So these are the 4 mission directors I just mentioned. Aeronautics is the aerospace research organization, so that covers the things with dealing with airspace, air traffic management, green fuel and clean environment flight of aircraft. We have our science program, which is split into our earth science, astrophysics, planetary science, and heliophysics, or the study of the sun. Our human exploration operations mission directorate, and our space technology mission directorate. And I'm going to go through each of those sort of individually here, one at a time. So for the Aeronautics mission directorate, as I mentioned, the research areas include aircraft safety. That's a big one. So de-icing of aircraft, new technologies for that, new technologies for lift and flight, safe flight, cockpit controls. We do green aviation, so biofuels and new forms of fuel. We do future aircraft development, long duration flight, new technology, new engineering to make the aircraft safer. We're working on supersonic flight, next generation air traffic management, and unmanned aircraft or drones. So, for example, in this case, the X-plane's sonic boom. The sound waves, in this picture, the T-38 is going into a transonic state, and what you're seeing is the sonic boom resonating off of the aircraft, and eventually you would hear the sonic boom. And so what we're trying to do is develop new technologies to allow for supersonic flight over land that has not been possible up to this point because of the sonic booms. But we believe that with new technology and new developments, you could develop a supersonic plane that could fly over populated areas without having the disturbances that we've had in the past, which would then, of course, greatly increase decrease, I should say, the travel time that you could use to get from place to place. So this is one of the interesting new technologies that our aeronautics group is working on. Another one I mentioned was the biofuel. So the NDMAX, or the NASA DLR, which is the German Aerospace Center, our counterpart in Germany, maximum mission. So what you have here is you have make sure I get this right, the NASA DC-8, which is the top left corner. That's the NASA plane that's instrumented with a lot of different instruments. And then the DLR Airbus, what is that one? It's an A320. It's their research plane, but in their case, it's putting out it's burning the fuels, putting out the trail of the fuels, and so then our trailing plane is analyzing those fuels to see how they're impacting the environment and the atmosphere. And the idea is to be able to get these new, cleaner burning fuels, but also not have an impact to performance of the aircraft. So on the German side, what they're also looking at is the impact of those fuels to the aircraft and how it could be. Could it be doing anything internally to the engines? Could it be getting low? How does it impact the fuel mileage and the fuel performance of the aircraft? So that's the type of stuff that we're looking at in our aeronautics field. The last one, let's see if this works. It is going to work. So drone traffic management is a big project that is being looked at in our aeronautics program, and we're going to play, hopefully. So this short video talks about what we're doing in this area. So it's at the pilot phase right now, but the idea is next year to start doing it over populated areas to look at how you can safely fly these drones as more and more of them are entering into our airspace system. And then the idea is to, by about 2020, have the system operational. And as the last part noted, we're working very closely with the United States Federal Aviation Administration as well as the ICAO, the International Coordinating Aircraft Organization, to make sure that what we're doing is fundamentally sound to the existing aircraft network and making sure that the drones can fit into the overarching system. And so that UTM system is a key funded component of the President's budget request that came out today and very much highlighted in that request. So moving on from aeronautics, I'll move to science. So science, I mentioned, has four programs of heliophysics, earth science, astrophysics, and planetary science. And what we're looking at in the case of this is an integrated program. How can they work together? The sun is a star, so the astrophysics program is looking at stars, but it's a very close star, so you can look at from different distances. Planetary systems, the Earth is a planet, so you're looking at other planets within our solar system. You're looking at planetary systems around other stars, and so there's a lot of overlap there that our system tries to take advantage of to get as much synergy out of as we can. And by the numbers, so we've got spacecraft-wise, we have 104 missions right now with 87 spacecraft. We're flying CubeSats, we're flying balloon payloads, we've got sounding rockets, so we've got a multitude of different, we have Earth-based aircraft campaigns that we're flying, and then there's technology development in our research program. So overall, our science program has a lot of different assets they can pull from to do a lot of different research and really learn about the world around us and the solar system and the universe around us. This is a snapshot of the different missions. It's sort of hard to see, but it's broken down to just by the different programmatic divisions I was just talking about. You've got Mars and planetary down in the bottom corner, and it shows the reach that we have across the solar system and across the universe when you're looking at different spectrums of the astrophysics missions. I'm not going to dwell on any one of these right now, but it just sort of gives you that big picture of all the missions that are out there. For our launches this year, we've got 6 exciting science launches coming up. Well, one of them actually already happened. The Gold payload in the middle there launched on the SES satellite a couple weeks ago by the Orion 5. The interesting thing with this, so the Gold instrument is a package. It's on the bottom of the SES communications satellite that's going to look at the ionosphere of the Earth. What's interesting about this and different is that it's flying on a commercial satellite. This is something new and different for NASA. We haven't flown payloads before on commercial satellites. We've used our own spacecraft. We've used the International Space Station. We haven't utilized this asset that's out there of these commercial satellites. And so we're looking at more opportunities now in the future as ways we can do that and expand that type of cooperation. The GRACE follow-on mission will look at Earth's gravity fields and the geology of the Earth. That'll launch nominally in late April, hopefully if the schedule holds, and that's a big partnership with our German colleagues. There's some French cooperation on it as well. The InSight Mars lander launches on May 5th, and this has a huge French contribution, which is the seismometer. It's the main instrument on this mission. It's a lander. It'll land on the surface of Mars, and it'll place a seismometer on the surface to measure Mars quakes, to measure asteroid impacts. It's one of the most sensitive seismometers ever developed. It'll also have, from our German colleagues, what we call a mole, which will pound into the ground to measure heat flow coming out of the planetary surface. The ICESat-2 satellite is going to look at ice levels on Earth. The Parker Solar Probe is a partnership also with France and with Germany that'll fly closer to the sun than any mission we've ever flown before. That mission's supposed to launch in the June or July timeframe. And then TESS is a small astrophysics mission that'll look at exoplanets in other solar systems. So I mentioned the sun. Why are we looking at the sun? Why do we care about the sun? It's our nearest star. So it's, of course, it's important to know, it's important to understand, but it's also really important to understand from the perspective of the space weather. what the sun does greatly impacts life here on Earth. You can have solar storms that can disrupt power grids. You can have, they can disrupt communications. They can impact the satellites in Earth orbit. So understanding the sun and being able to understand what it's doing at any given time is extremely important to life here on Earth. Speaking of the Earth, so this is actually a picture of the Winter Olympic sites of what's going on right now in Korea. So for understanding the Earth, we're looking at it from a unique vantage point of being able to be in space, to analyze the entire system of systems of the Earth, everything that's going on from the atmosphere down to the surface and then into the interior. Using satellites, it just gives you a very different perspective and a better understanding of the whole package of what's going on Earth. And so in that regard, you're using technology, you're using the science, and you're using the global observations to be able to provide for the societal benefits of everybody, to understand how the weather patterns are changing, to understand climate, to understand the geology of the Earth. So all of that together is really good for Earth science. And so when you put it all together, you get a better understanding of things like hurricanes. You can see, using the different satellites, the different dimensions of the hurricanes. You can get a better understanding of the strength of the hurricanes. You can better predict where the path is taking those storms. So these are the types of things that our Earth Science program is doing. From our planetary program, we've visited every planet in the solar system, and of course Mars has been a unique focus of NASA over the last 20 years or so. And no mission better exemplifies it than the Curiosity rover, which is a great partnership with many partners in Europe and around the world. Whoops. See if I can get this to play. And so this video is just from a few days ago, which is a summary. Summary of where Curiosity has been.
When the Curiosity rover climbed a ridge and the skies cleared up during Martian winter, we had the chance to take this amazing panorama, and I'm really glad we did. Curiosity is inside Gale Crater, a huge basin made by an impactor about 3.8 billion years ago. The mountains across the crater floor are actually the northern rim of the crater. They rise over a mile above the rover. It's so clear when we took this image that you can even see a hill outside the crater that is 50 miles away. I love how you can see Peace Vallis, a channel that once held a flowing river, like many others that formed lakes inside Gale Crater. This is also the first time we could look back and see the mission since landing in 2012. Here's the path we took. After landing, we drove to Yellowknife Bay. Before we turned south, Cooperstown, and the Kimberley. The rover studied dark, wind-blown sand at Namib Dune. Curiosity then weaved between the Murray Buttes, checked out Ireson Hill, and made a tricky crossing of the Bagnall Dunes before reaching the ridge where it sits today and caught this amazing view.
So that's the life of our Curiosity rover since it landed several years ago, and has fundamentally changed our understanding of Mars, and really is a stepping stone to future Mars missions. We have another rover in 2020 that's based on the design of the Curiosity rover. That'll start what we hope will be the sample return campaign to return a sample from Mars, and then eventually humans to Mars in the 2030s or 2040s. And it all traces back to, and even further back to the Spirit and Opportunity rovers first in 2003. But then Curiosity is really, with its strong instrument suite, has really changed our understanding. Another mission that's changed our understanding is the Cassini mission, which came to its glorious end in September, just a few months ago. This mission, again, changed our understanding of the Saturnian system in this case. From its launch in 1997 until its end, we got a better understanding of Saturn itself, of the moons, Enceladus down on the left-hand side of your view with the jets coming out of the bottom, could harbor microscopic life under the surface. We don't know. We want to get back there and see Titan and its methane lakes. And we found the Death Star also orbiting Saturn, so we can always check that out too. I mean Mimas. That's Mimas, not the Death Star. And from its last look, so this is a video compilation that our folks at the Jet Propulsion Lab have put together of the last few images that Cassini took in its last few views of Saturn. That's Titan there. Different views of the different ring pattern, or the different parts of the rings. You see one of the moons through the ring surface there. And then the very last image that we got back from the spacecraft as it was entering into the atmosphere. And then heading further out into the solar system, we still have the New Horizons going. So it visited Pluto a couple years ago, and on New Year's Day next year, it will visit the most distant planetary object that we visited in our solar system, which is another Kuiper Belt object, which they haven't named yet. It's just got a letter number designation right now, but there's a contest out there, I think, to name what that planetary body will be called forever forward. But so we keep pressing our out further and further into the solar system. We're exploring. We've got new missions that we're studying that will go back to, could go back to Titan, could go back to Enceladus. We've got future asteroid missions that we're looking at. So we've got a good suite of planetary exploration on the horizon. We also still have our astrophysics missions looking even beyond our solar system. This is a Hubble picture that was released just a day or two ago, aptly named The Penguin and the Egg, as it looks like a penguin holding its egg under its feet. Even after all these years, the Hubble Space Telescope still produces these amazing photos, but behind the photo is the science that it's producing, the new understandings of these galaxies and how they're formed, how they interact with each other. And so these are the types of things that we really want to get out of our astrophysics missions. And every once in a while, we find stuff hidden there, such as exoplanets. And we found several hundred exoplanets orbiting other stars to this point. One of which our Belgian colleagues were the first to, utilizing our Spitzer telescope and ground-based telescopes, discovered this system, the TRAPPIST-1 system, that we're still now, as we train more and more of our telescopes on this system, are learning more and more things about these planets. It's believed that the middle set are all in a habitable zone for this star. And now they're looking at that and in further detail, and they're finding that there are atmospheres on these planets. So who knows what could be on the surface of these planets? And these are the types of things, as we get more and more telescopes built, in particular, the James Webb Space Telescope is going to tell us more and more about these exoplanet bodies and what's there, what their atmospheres are made of, how far are they from their stars, what are their cores made of. And this telescope is a great partnership of Europe. It'll launch on the Orion 5 launch vehicle in the roughly March 2019 timeframe. This is it coming out of the testing chamber at the Johnson Space Center a few weeks ago. It's now been shipped to California, where it's being integrated, and all the different parts of it are coming together. Of the 4 instrument payload, 2 of the instruments are European, built by consortiums here in Europe. And so this mission, when it launches, is going to revolutionize our understanding, looking all the way back to the earliest time epochs of the dawn of the universe. So switching mission directorates again, so back to human spaceflight, and coming back a little closer to home. So the core program of our human spaceflight program is the International Space Station. First elements started launching in the late 1990s. It's been permanently manned since the early 2000s. And it's now a fully functioning and operational space station, crew of 6, and doing experiments, doing the the station keeping to keep the orbital outpost in good working order. But it's also, it's a symbol of what we can do together. It's the greatest engineering feat that we've done in space. And we have international astronauts up there on a regular basis, such as Thomas Pesquet, who was there from January through June of last year. And so these are great opportunities for us to explore close to home. The space station's got earth science experiments as well, astrophysics, heliophysics on the external payloads. It's got a lot of, actually I think, utilization. On the inside, we're doing materials research. We're doing 3D printing now on the space station. We're learning to live and work away from Earth so that we can go deeper and deeper in our exploration program. This is the test bed, the proving ground, where we're really learning how to do this stuff in space so that we can do more eventually. The commercial crew program is going to be great for the International Space Station when it comes online late this year or early next year. Boeing and SpaceX, both their spacecraft are coming along very well, and we're looking forward to these flights start servicing the space station. It'll increase the crew, which will increase the research time so that we can get even more benefit out of the space station. Looking to the future, we've got the Orion, and which is the capsule with the European service module, which is the back end with the solar arrays that's being built in Bremen as we speak. And that's going to launch on the Space Launch System. The first full integrated test flight of this will be in late 2019 or early 2020, somewhere in that neighborhood. We're still working on the exact date. And it'll be an unmanned mission, the first flight, but it'll go around the moon. And actually, I think we have it in video format here. So it's showing okay. So the Space Launch System and the Orion capsule is going to be critical to the foundations of what we're going to do in deep space. And so what we're planning to do with the budget released today, actually, it clarifies the viewpoint a little bit in that for 2022 would be the first element of a cislunar space station, a gateway of sorts to both a gateway to the moon, and a gateway on to deeper space, Mars, asteroids, and other places we can get to. And so with the 2022 launch, we will launch the propulsion module for that new space station. And that station will allow us what we, again, calling the proving ground, where we can test our technologies in deeper space, but still close enough that you can get back to Earth in an emergency in a few days' time, instead of with Mars, where it's several months' time to get back to Earth in the case of an emergency. So we can test out living and working deeper in space. We can figure out solutions to some of the major problems we have for going to Mars, such as the radiation shielding on the spacecraft is a very big unknown for us still at this point for the journey to Mars. We still need to work on bone loss and bone density issues, such that when the astronauts get to Mars, how are they going to function on the surface? Right now, there's concerns that because of the long duration space flight, they wouldn't be able to. So by working and spending more time in the lunar vicinity, we can get more data, we can do more experiments, and we can see how we can better function on those more deep space missions. There's also advantages to using a lunar gateway to get to Mars from a fuel perspective, from a propulsion perspective. So these are the types of things that we'll be able to do using that lunar gateway. Our last mission directorate, space technology, it cuts across all of the other areas. It tries to integrate a lot of the technological needs of the agency. And what we're going to see going forward is a stronger focus on the exploration technologies that we need, and making it work more closely with the Human Spaceflight and Exploration Mission Directorate to get a better synergy there between the two organizations to make sure we're really focusing the technologies that we need. But you can see some of the things here, and there's other stuff not on here. Solar electric propulsion is a big one that we're working on, that our technology organization is working on to get better ability to go further and deeper into space from a propulsion perspective. So that's NASA as a snapshot. So with Europe then, I've already mentioned quite a few projects that we're doing with Europe, and what you can see here is we've got a lot of stuff with Europe. We've got way more cooperation with Europe than the rest of the world put together. And it runs the entire spectrum of the activities I just went through: science, human space flight, aeronautics, technology. We're cooperating with Europe across all of those. We partner with governments, we partner with industry, universities, research institutes, even museums to conduct research and do data analysis and to display our artifacts that we have. And so of the 480 or so agreements that you saw on the previous page, the European Space Agency, of course, from a dollar perspective, is one of our biggest partners. They're bringing because of being able to integrate across Europe, they're bringing together bigger contributions to our mission. So like the European Service Module I mentioned on the Orion spacecraft, or the James Webb Space Telescope contributions that any one European member state would have struggled to be able to afford, but Europe as a whole can pull together and be able to provide those great assets for our cooperation. And there's also goes the other way as well, of us contributing to European missions, the Solar Orbiter spacecraft that'll study the sun coming up in a couple years, Euclid, a dark energy mission that the European Space Agency is working on, where NASA is contributing to these European missions, or the JUICE mission to Jupiter. With France, we've got Mars and planetary missions. Earth science with the JASON series has been a great understanding better the ocean topography and sea heights, water heights on the Earth. And then the new mission, the surface water and ocean topography mission, which will launch in 2020, will look at freshwater in addition to the saltwater that we've looked at in the past, and get a much better understanding of the full water cycle on Earth. With Germany, we've got the Sophia, which is a 747 aircraft that has an infrared telescope mounted in the back that has it's a large hole with a door that opens up. I mean, these are the types of, again, technology and science coming together. And the great thing with Sophia is that you can swap out instruments and be able to get new and advanced technology and give new scientists and students even opportunities that they couldn't get on a satellite in orbit. Once it's up there, it's up there. And so SOFIA gives new opportunities there. We've got the United Kingdom, Italy, and others where we've got lots of cooperation, lots of agreements across the board. And why do we do it? We do it to learn to live and work together. The end goal is exploration, whether it be of the Earth, of the sun, or human exploration. It's all exploration, and it's working and living together. And so, like in this case, Alexander Gerst on the International Space Station watching the World Cup from a few years ago. So this is the type of stuff that they're doing research, but it's also life lessons being learned and being developed. We also have ground-based activities that across Europe that we rely on. One of our 3 deep space network stations is just outside of Madrid, and along with another one in Australia and one in the United States. The 3 of those networks together provide all of our planetary missions data to Earth. Without these, we wouldn't be able to get the data that really drives our science. So there's opportunities for the future, not only in space, but supporting space from these types of ground networks. If you're interested in more on all of our international cooperation together, there's a book that my office produces called Global Reach that goes into more detail on each of our international collaborations that we have. This current version is a couple years old now, and my office is working on an update that should be out in the next few months, and we'll give the current snapshot of what our international activities look like. So, turning to data. NASA has operated under a free and open data policy for a very long time. We have a data portal that really gives a good overview of all the different subdirectories of the NASA website that you can get access to different types of data, different source materials. And so that's a great place to start for those that are interested in data, because what our data is out there, let me take one step back. So the driver to this predates what is here. So the government initiative, the Open Government Initiative that was started under the Bush administration several years ago, we were already doing this. We were already putting it out there. This sort of codified how NASA puts the data out there. But we were already doing this. The planetary data system that I mentioned here has been around since the 1990s, putting all of our planetary data out there for everybody to use. Our Earth science program has been doing the same. And it's now even better in that we've started pulling it into the same place. So you can go to one, sort of a quote-unquote one-stop shop that allows you to find all this data and be able to use it for different needs. And the other benefit of this is that it's now started to spin off to some of our space agency partners. The European Commission is putting all the Copernicus Earth science data out for public use. Our Japanese colleagues are starting to put more and more out. Our Russian colleagues. So it's starting to, the idea is propagating to get more and more people to put their data out there for everybody to be able to use. Part of that's an economic driver. And I'll come to this in a second, but it's being driven by the applications business. They realize there's a further downstream business approach that they can still get the viewpoint of a return on investment that a lot of our partners, that drives how they think when they talk about space business. For NASA, that's never been our concern. Our concern is just for sort of the altruistic good of getting the data out there for people to know what's going on in the universe around them. The other challenge we've got is that for NASA, and it's starting to become an issue for our partners as well, is it's not getting the data out there. It's that there's too much data. There's so much data. And so we've got a big data problem that's starting to emerge. And so the challenge has become modeling and that observational data, and it's going to continue to grow. And so how do we archive it? How do we network it? How do we create a library that the traditional models won't work anymore. We need to create new ways to be able to catalog and to store this data so that people can actually use it and not be overwhelmed by it. So we're looking at actions now like building centralized data analytics systems. We're looking at data proximal analytical capabilities and so forth to get to the point where we're looking at large-scale science informatics systems that'll be needed to solve the future data challenges. So related to this is the open source material. Likewise, we're a firm believer in making as much of this available as possible. We participate under the open source initiative, and this site here, the code.nasa.gov, is a good source for everything that we've put out there that anybody can go and just pull off. We've also really been working to advance our technology transfer program so that people can have access to NASA patents with no upfront licensing costs, which then cuts down on the two biggest challenges, which is raising the capital and securing the intellectual property rights. Unfortunately, this particular initiative is limited to US industry, but there's no reason that the European Space Agency, the French Space Agency, others couldn't copy this model to try to get these ideas and these products out into the community so that others can use them in the same fashion. Our technology transfer program also has a spin-offs product that they create every year so that it can educate people on what it is that we're doing and what products we're putting out there. The 2018 version just got published within the last week or two on our website. And we're also relying more and more on crowdsourcing activities with the first agency crowdsourcing expo coming up in May 2018 to showcase off ways that people can get involved and utilize what NASA has out there. The best example, of course, is the Space Apps Challenge, which has now been running for, I forget if it's 6 or 7 years, it's an incubator innovation program that allows people to get a broader community, or allows NASA to get a broader community interested in thinking about what space can do for our daily lives. It revolves around teamwork. It's a hackathon, so you're talking about people coming together. Sometimes they know each other, sometimes they form their teams on the spot, but to produce new and innovative ideas utilizing the NASA data. They're making new connections, but they're having fun. And it's using the openly available data and giving them an experience to build these applications that can improve quality of life here on Earth. They can be planetary. They can do, and it's beyond just applications too, of using robotics and visualization technology, new hardware. So it's sort of unlimited to what the community can do with this. And it's mainly been students, but we also have professional teams involved as well. And so it just gives everybody a fun thing to do for a long weekend and brings people together. But focusing on the applications itself, so what is all this data giddiness? So it prompts the question of what it's for. And this seems to be the next generation, is the use of this data for the development of applications. There's already an entire industry starting to develop utilizing these sources, and so NASA created what we call the API, which is a site that it's the objective of making the NASA data, including the imagery data, eminently accessible to the application developers in one site. They can go to it, and it's both from a novice to an experienced level that can use this site and be able to get a better understanding of what's out there. Generally speaking, what we've seen is that largely the applications are earth science based. They're focused on the earth science initiatives that we've got, focusing on societal needs, so health and air quality, water resources, ecological forecasting, disasters, and wildland fires. But we're starting to see new additional initiatives emerging. You're seeing agricultural, smart farming. You're seeing new energy and new transportation systems developing using space-based applications that even a few years ago, people weren't thinking of using space technology to help autonomous driving, autonomous trains, the tracking flights. Following several tragedies, we now realize that there's needs for better tracking of of aircraft so that we know where things are. These are the types of initiatives that have developed out of our space community that are impacting daily life and helping people on a daily basis. And so we get applications like this that get created so in this particular case, it's the yearly biosphere that you're seeing. If I can get it to work. So what you're seeing is moving from winter to spring to summer in the northern hemisphere in particular, you can really see it, of the greening up of the northern hemisphere using the data. I'll run that one more time. It goes fairly quickly. But you're also seeing the oceans and the chlorophyll in the oceans changing as well over the course of a year. These are the types, these applications help us better understand the planet around us and how and what the impacts are to those of us living here and how we can better utilize it. To the point that we can then go even into capacity building programs. NASA has 3 that we work with, the RSET, the Develop, and the Servier. And the idea here is to help the developing world be able to access and apply NASA's Earth science data to help their localized issues, whether it be flooding, whether it be disaster management, whether it be monitoring animals even, or something like that, migration animals, or you can use it for poaching. The data can be used for a lot of different applications, and it's really the only limit is the imagination of how you can apply the different data sets that are out there on the web. But it goes beyond just here on Earth as well. When we're still talking about the idea of helping everyday life here on Earth, the space situational awareness is sort of the next step that a lot of people are talking about. And there's 3 categories that make up space situational awareness in most definitions. There's space debris, there's near-Earth objects, and there's space weather. I mentioned the space weather already, the middle bullet. That's the study of the sun to be able to forecast the space weather coming out of the sun. And this is to protect, if we know it's coming, if we know there's a solar storm coming, you can shut power grids off. You can put spacecraft into safe modes. You can turn them away from the solar storm. You can protect aircraft passengers by not flying as high. Or you can change a route to a different part of the Earth to not be in the direct path of the storm. An 1859 storm destroyed telegraph service across a large swath of the northern hemisphere when it hit. That was 1859 technology, and actually created wildfires, and there's a lot of damage that was caused. If that magnitude of a storm were to hit today without any warning, it would be catastrophic. It would shut down dozens of satellites. Communication would be off the grid for days, if not weeks. Navigation systems wouldn't be working. And so if you think in terms of what I was just talking about of the applications, the positive aspect that we're developing, autonomous cars, autonomous trains, flight data, stuff like that, if you can't get access to that because of these solar storms, the ripple effects of the impact of these solar storms will be felt very, very widely. So understanding the impact of the sun on our daily life is important. For the near-Earth objects, there's some 18,000 near-Earth objects that are tracked, with more than 8,000 of them larger than 140 meters, which in the case of a 140-meter asteroid, the idea is that would be considered a city killer, versus a kilometer-sized asteroid, which we feel we've mapped about 90% of the kilometer-sized asteroids would be a more catastrophic impact of perhaps even a civilization-ending impact if it's a kilometer size. But even at 8,001, where you're talking the destruction of a city, knowing and understanding where these are is important. So we have an array of telescopes on the ground. We've got space-based assets that we're utilizing to track and to understand where these are. so we can predict, and they feed into what's called the Minor Planet Center. And there's an international group, the International Asteroid Warning Network, that works together to predict where these are going. And then the idea, once you're tracking them, what if you do find one that is heading for Earth? Then it becomes a mitigation issue. And so we've got missions that we're developing now. The budget coming out today will fund what's called DART, which is part of a collaborative mission that may or may not be with Europe. It had originally been envisioned to be with Europe, and if the European Space Agency has the funding, we'll potentially do it together. But it's an asteroid impactor mission, so we have an asteroid that we'll send a small impactor into to then measure how its course changes by impacting it. And the idea is that, and I'll use my hands here for a second, if we have Earth here and you have the asteroid coming towards it, if just the slightest impact can change the course of the asteroid such that then it misses Earth. And so this will be a good technology demonstration mission to see if to do a proof of concept of that idea. Another way is what we call a gravity tractor, where you send a satellite to an asteroid and you pull off a chunk of it to make your satellite bigger, and you have the two bodies, and the gravity of the smaller object is enough to then change the course of the larger object. The challenge, though, goes back to the first part of this, is that you have to know where these are. So that's where the detection and the tracking and the monitoring comes into play first. And then we can then think about what the mitigation scenarios can be later. The last area here is the orbital debris. And so we're tracking 23,000 pieces that are larger than 10 centimeters. But it's believed that a 1 millimeter piece could destroy a satellite if it hits in the right part of a satellite. And there's over 100 million of those that size. And so we're tracking as much of this as we can, but there's a lot more out there that we need to be able to track. And that becomes a data analytics problem there as well. And this is a problem that Europe, the US, or in particular Japan to a lesser degree, are working together to study what the next generation of these tracking systems are going to look like, so that we can work to better notify satellite operators so they can move satellites out of the way, or to even eventually, the idea is that you could have an active debris removal system where you're collecting the debris and you're pulling it out of orbit, or putting it into a safer orbit. There's a couple companies in the US and Europe both that are studying that concept, and there's some demonstration missions that are going to launch in the near future. And that's going to be more of a private sector enterprise in the early stage, but NASA's also studying this. We're studying satellite servicing. We've done a demonstration on the International Space Station, and we're working towards doing an independent satellite demonstration to show that you can repair a satellite in orbit robotically. These are the types of things that the future of space is really looking towards. And they're all, again, data-driven. That's going to take a lot of this. So my last slide is a shout out to SpaceX. We can't say enough about the Falcon Heavy launch last week. The launch of the Tesla Roadster and Starman. Space is about discovery and science. It's about innovation and advancement. But it's also about inspiring a future generation to explore, to learn, and to dream. And that's what this is all about. NASA works closely with SpaceX on a lot of our projects. And this is the type of stuff that gets people talking. It gets people thinking about the future and what the possibilities could be, and it just is. It makes things fun again. And I mean, not that we're not doing that at NASA as well with a lot of the missions I just went through, but this is something that grabs people's attention, and that's the type of projects that we really need throughout the space industry to be able to get people to dream. And it's also there's two parts to it. It's the dream part, and it's also an explanation part. It's telling people what all of the different things are that space does. A lot of the stuff I just went through, but there's a lot more that space is doing on a daily basis that people now take for granted and don't realize even a lot of what it is that comes from space. And so just being able to tell people and explain to people how important space can be is something that we all can do. Everybody that's here that has an interest in space can take that message, and it'll help then sort of the chain reaction. You get people interested in what space is doing here, you can get more money, you can get more for exploration, and you can spin off things like this so that people can dream. Thank you. So I promised questions, so if anybody has any questions. So the budget that comes out today does propose what the news had been reporting, that the U.S. proposal would be in the 2020, and at the end of 2024 to, it's not a deorbit of the space station, it's a repurposing of the space station with more commercial enterprise taking charge, such that NASA, ESA, and others could become a customer of that, or of that organization that's then running the space station. To get to that point, though, is going to be a lot of discussion. We've got to have a lot of conversation with industry. We've got to have a conversation with our international partners. And this is just the first part also of a proposal coming from the administration today. Congress still has to weigh in on that. And for those that you may have seen, the congressional response has not been necessarily favorable to the administration's proposal. So we'll have to see how that plays out over the course of the coming year and what they decide. The proposal, though, what is also different in this proposal is that it would put money into a dedicated line in the budget to fund in 2019, starting at $150 million, to have more money to invest in the commercial enterprises to be able to have them take over in the 2024 timeframe. So it's putting money into the commercial providers to develop that market better and get more of a commercial base for the enterprise. Initiative, I don't know if that's the right word. It would be a partnership with the private sector, a public-private partnership to look at new ways to manage the space station, in a sense, is how I would consider it. Yeah.
Speaking of commercial partnerships, do you have an update on commercial crew? SpaceX recently talked about testing maybe the end of the year.
That's what we're still hearing, and so test flights starting for both Boeing and SpaceX in fourth quarter this year. Operational flights, we're still looking at when the operational flights would start and how you can bridge a gap between, so right now our Soyuz purchases have run through, I think, second quarter of 2019. If the commercial providers aren't all the way online, is there a way to use the test flights, at least in a limited way, perhaps with a smaller crew, to bridge the gap to the operational? So we're still looking at that, but things are looking good for at least the test flights to start by the end of the year. Yes?
So SpaceX has been stating for the last few years that they want to go to Mars, and they demonstrated last week that they have the resources to do it.
Mm-hmm.
As is a proof of concept. And so as an American, do you think it is conflicting with Orion, like the BFR Orion, as a country and as a US citizen, don't you think that you are duplicating the effort?
We're not duplicating, they're complementary. We need both, in a sense. The space launch system capabilities are going to still be greater than at least of the Falcon Heavy. And for the BFR, while I don't doubt that SpaceX will eventually develop it, it's not here yet. So it's still down the road. And so for what we need in the near term, the Space Launch System is the rocket that we need, that we feel NASA need to meet the needs of the mission for the exploration. The Falcon Heavy will certainly complement that with, so I mentioned the cislunar gateway. That station will have the large components that need the launch of the SLS, but there'll be medium-sized components and supplies and stuff like that, that the Falcon Heavy will be great for meeting those needs on the intermediate level. So we very much view it as a complementary partnership working together. And as far as the developments that SpaceX has come to this point, while a large chunk of it is self-funded, a large chunk of it also has come from the commercial cargo and the commercial crew flights that NASA's funded, from Air Force contracts to develop for the national security payloads. And so we view this as an investment and a provider that we've helped to develop to this point, and so we look forward to working with them going forward. You mentioned going to Mars and some of the other activities. And I guess it was 2 years ago he announced that they were going to initially send a 2-person crew around the moon, which he's now, SpaceX has now backed off and said they're not intending to do that this year, as they had previously said. Regarding the Mars missions, from the perspective of NASA, as long as they're meeting their contractual obligations to us, if they're doing something else on their own time and they've got their resources and they've got the people willing to do it, then all the better. I mean, that's again good for everyone. The more that we're looking at Mars, the more that we're studying ways to get to Mars, it benefits the entire space community. Any others? No? Oh, yeah. So NASA does. I mean, we're not in it for the making of the money. I think some of our partners, though, view it that way. And so there's the idea of control and how you control how that data is used in the applications or what benefit you get back. Wanting targeted applications, for instance, is something that we've heard several partners say over the course of time, of saying, well, we only want applications that meet our future needs of a government. Like we basically want the applications feeding back into the government as a resource. From the U.S. perspective, though, we don't get into that. I mean, we're hands off once they start using the data downstream. A lot of it's used internal by NASA researchers, but a lot of it's used by the private sector, both industry and academia. I'm not sure I answered the question, but it's a virtual site, yeah. Yeah, the return on investment is it's an argument we hear frequently from different parts of the international community, and it's just not something that NASA has ever really focused on. The European Space Agency had a contracted study about a year ago, I guess it was, that looked at the value of space and different parts of space and what the return on the euro in that case was. And if I remember correctly, the overall return was something on the order of 6 to 1, but in different parts were much higher or much lower depending on the viewpoint. So human space flight, the actual return on the investment was lower at like 2.5 or 3, but there was still a positive net. Whereas some of the earth science activities, and if you look at things along in the navigation area, Galileo and GPS, it was even much higher returns, well above the 6. That was the average. So a lot of it depends on what the type of activity is, but generally speaking, and for as long as I've been in the space sector, it's always been a positive return every time somebody's done one of these studies. Yeah.
Possible in Europe for a private business to work with NASA? It's possible for that? Is different from
It's possible. So they're direct NASA to European business partnerships. There's sort of two ways. So sometimes our contracts are open for global competition, and in those cases, European companies can compete for the contract. The other option is sometimes we have mutual interest in research in a research field, and so we'll do a partnership based on that mutual interest where the company is self-funding now. So they get the benefits of working with NASA, whether it be our facilities or our data, or sort of the further downstream data, the manipulated data, shall we say, or just the access to our researchers. But they're bringing their own assets to that cooperation as well, and we do what's called a Space Act agreement for that, and so we work in terms of that partnership in that regard.
If you go beyond or startup or big stage as possible, or if it's innovative or something like that?
Most of it's in the early stage activities, but I think it's possible. It would depend on the specific idea, and we can, and so it's part of my job here is to facilitate it when it's possible, and making contacts and things like that, and give advice. Yeah. So, yeah. Right, okay, so with the budget proposed today, which Congress, so the way the budgeting works is the president proposes a budget and then Congress eventually acts on the budget. So for the fiscal year 2018 that started October 1st, we're still under a what we call a continuing resolution. So we don't have a permanent budget for this year yet. And the most current continuing resolution goes until March 23rd. Hopefully by then we'll have this year's budget. Then they'll start thinking about the 2019 budget, maybe, but what could also happen is they'll look at what's proposed in the 2019 budget while they're still working on the 2018 budget and start to consider some of that in the current budget. What's funded up to this point so far for the lunar is just studies to a large degree, but it also relies on the large infrastructure that we already have in place that's being developed of the Space Launch System and the Orion capsule. And so it builds off of that. What the proposal today comes out with is that it'll be a lunar orbiting space station that will be a gateway to the surface so that eventually, whether it's NASA, commercial, or international partners, will be able to use that gateway as a means to and from the surface. In addition to that, we're ramping back up our lunar robotic program. Again, if Congress funds it, the administration proposal is this, to ramp up a lunar robotic program to better study and understand the moon's surface from a robotic perspective so that you can have a better idea where to land, where to explore, where to prospect, so that when you are ready to put humans on the surface on a more permanent base, you'll have a better idea of where to go. And ultimately, yeah, the idea is to go to the moon to stay, in this case, that you're perhaps not a necessarily permanently manned, but long duration sorties to the space station, long duration sorties to the surface, and have a long-term presence there, not just like we did with the Apollo of a few days. So that's the plan. And then Mars is still the horizon goal. So this is still a stepping stone, like I was saying, to learn to work deep space, but not far space. You're still only a few days away before you start then working your way towards Mars in the hopefully 2030s, probably more realistic 2040s, but somewhere in there. I think I saw, was somebody, was there a hand up now? Anybody else? Okay.
Je vous propose de continuer la soirée autour d'une coupe de champagne. De l'autre côté, vous aurez donc loisir de pouvoir discuter avec
And I should add also, I have some NASA stickers. I don't know if there's a place we'll find a place to put them out.
Thanks, that's great. You can look at his t-shirt.
Ah, the SpaceX t-shirt.
He's a huge fan.